In this video, I will be going over lesson 18, which is about proportional relationships in ratios and tables. Our first question here says that Noah works at a store whose inventory includes electronic toys and batteries. Or Nora, sorry, not Noah. She records the sales of these items for the 4-day period in a table. What does the value 10, 40 mean? Okay, if I look here at 10 represents the amount of electronic toys, okay, which means I am looking for where it says that 10 represents electronic toys. So here where it says batteries, this is a nope. And on this bottom one, it doesn't even have anything relating to 10, so that one is also a nope. Then this 40 represents the amount of batteries. So it's just telling me that this 40 represents the amount of batteries that are being sold. Okay, so 40 batteries are sold. Here it says 40 more batteries. There's no indication that it's 40 more, which makes this one incorrect. Our next question says, examine the diagram which represents a proportional relationship between the ounces of ground coffee used to brew some cups of coffee and the corresponding number of cups. The first brew has blank cups of coffee, which corresponds to 3.75 cups of coffee. So I'm looking at this one here, and this question is much easier than you might think. Okay, this 3.75 represents cups of coffee, and these 3 drops of coffee here have to represent 3 ounces. Okay, so it is 3 ounces. It is not cups because the 3.75 represents cups, which means that this 3 little raindrops here must represent ounces. Okay, because it says it represents the relationship between ounces and cups. So we need to make sure we have one of each. Our next question is a part A and part B. Remember that you are only picking one A and one B. You're not picking 2 of both. There's only one right answer for each of the questions. This one says that Julian is swimming laps in a pool and he records his lap times in the table. There is a proportional relationship, which means that there's a unit rate. And let's use this unit rate to help us answer these questions. Okay, remember that you have your x and then y. When I write it as y over x, that means that I'm going to have 2/3 of a minute. 2/3 of a minute for every 1 lap. 1 represents laps. 2/3 represents minutes. Part A wants to know, describe the meaning of the unit rate in this context. Okay? Well, if I look here, the unit rate is telling me how long it takes him to swim 1 lap. Right? It takes him 2/3 of a minute to swim 1 lap. So the unit rate here is going to be the unit rate is going to be the time it takes Julian to swim 1 lap. So it's the time it takes Julian to swim 1 lap. And then B wants to know, what is the ordered pair? Well, remember your ordered pair can be written in the form x comma y. My x is 1 and my y is 2/3. So I would have 1 comma 2/3. Our next question. So we want to write an equation that describes the proportional relationship between R and the number of reams purchased and the total cost C. If you think back to our quiz video, we did one similar to this, except now we just have to take that unit rate that we found and put it into an equation. So let's use the smaller numbers to find our unit rate. Here is x and here is y. So when I write it as y over x, I'm going to have 1188 over 4. And I need to simplify this to get a 1 in the denominator, so let's divide that top and bottom by 4. Don't be afraid to type this into a calculator to help you. So 11.88 divided by 4. And that's going to give me 297. Okay, so 297 is my unit rate, which means that this is what I need to put in my equation for my number. Now remember that you write your equation in the form y equals some number and then your x. Here my y represents cost, right? My y is right here and it represents cost. It wants us to use c for cost, so I'm going to take my y and replace it with a c. My number I know is my unit rate, which is going to be 297. And then it tells me to use R for my X, right? X is my R because X is my number of reams. So I'm going to replace X with R. So my equation is going to be C equals 2.97R. When you're writing this into your workbook, do not include spaces. Okay, don't use spaces. Our next one, so it says that a toll bridge operator periodically records the number of cars that cross the bridge, their payment totals, and the table. Which equations correctly calculate the proportional relationship between C, the number of cars, and P, the total payment collected? For this problem here, we need to figure out what the unit rate is. So again, with our table, the first column is x, the second column is y. I'm going to put my y over x, so 1320 over 11. I'm going to divide top and bottom by 11. When I divide 11 or 13.20 by 11, I get 1.2. Okay, so this is the number I want to use, which means these two equations down here that use that 0.83, I am not using because it is not using our unit rates. Now I'm going to tell you right off the bat, this one here is correct because it's in that form y equals our number times x. And the other one is a little bit trickier to spot. It is this top one here that is P over C equals 1.20. And the reason why is because if I take this P equals 1.20 times C, I can divide both sides by C, which would cancel it here and add it over here. Don't worry too much about where that came from. We will go into that more next semester when we start doing equations. Okay, so for right now, just know that those two are correct. Our next problem here says that an organic makeup company uses lemon oil in its face soap, and the diagram shows the number of drops used in soap. Part A is asking which equation describes the relationship, and Part B wants to know how many drops of lemon oil are needed. Okay, so if you think back to this problem, we already found what this question mark is. And we also already found the unit rate. We did this for our quiz. And I'll go over it one more time. So again, I'm going to use my x and y. So I'm going to have 2 over 10 drops. I need to get it to a 1 to be my unit rate. And that's going to give me 0.2. So my equation here is going to be this one right here, because remember your equation must have your unit rate in it. So my unit rate is 0.2. Then I know I need 0.2 drops for every 1. So if I need to have 0.8 over this question mark here, I can multiply this up here, 0.2 times 4, and I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. So 1 times 4 is just 4. Which means that for part B, I am using 4 drops of lemon oil to make this soap. Alright, our last question. The pilot keeps a log of her flight times and flight distance during an international flight as shown in the table. The relationship is proportional. The co-pilot wants to calculate what time they passed a checkpoint at mile 1500. This can be determined using the equation blank, and to find that they passed the checkpoint after approximately blank hours. So again, we need to determine what our equation is going to be, and to do that we need our unit rate. Okay, so let's use our table here. Remember that you have x and then y. So I'm going to use these 2 points here. And when I have y over x, because this is the setup I need to use to write my unit rates, my y value is 536 and my x value is 1. So this is my unit rate, which means that when I am looking for my equation, I want to use an equation that has this 536, which is not this one, and it's also not this one. Okay, so remember that we need to have y equal to some number and then times x. Okay, so you know what? I see what I did here. I made a slight oopsie. So this equation here is actually supposed to be t equals d over 536. So I apologize, that is my mistake. I forgot to change this into a fraction. This is actually the correct equation here. Okay, so that is the equation you want to choose. For blank 2, if we know that it takes them 536 miles to go in 1 hour, we want to know how many hours approximately is it for them to fly the 1,500 miles. Okay, so if I take that 1,500 miles and I divide it by 536, that is going to give me approximately how long it takes them. So again, we're going to type this into a calculator. So I have 1,500, we're going to divide it by 536, and you can see here I get 2.7985. I can round this to 2.8. So for blank 2, it is 2.8. Alright, that is the last problem for lesson 18. Please let me know if you have any questions.